And you can see the first slide, Sarah. Sarah, you're on mute.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Excellent. Well, we're a couple minutes ahead of the top of the hour. We've got folks joining us already. For those of you that are joining us, hello, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and use the chat function? Tell us a little bit about who you are, about your organization, and where you're located. We'll get started in just a moment.
Look at Melissa in Habitat in Georgia. Hey, Melissa. And Margaret at GBMC Healthcare in Baltimore. Wow, these are all places I want to go to. For me, Mary, these places are just like on, they're on movies. So I think that Grimm is a documentary about Portland, so. High gun violence prevention in Wisconsin. There we go. Timmy is ISU Legal Studies. Vernon, and he's a consultant. Hey, fellow consultant. Hi, Vernon in Houston, Texas. Oh, we're about to start properly now, aren't we? I'll shut up.
Great. Well, for those of you that are joining us, welcome. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, if you've just joined, why don't you go ahead and use the chat function. Tell us who you are, a little bit about your organization, and where you're located. We'll get started soon. Excellent. Sean, I'm going to give folks a minute or two to join us. If they're anything like our schedules, they're probably jumping from one meeting to the next. So.
Oh, of course. Are you happy for me to chat away?
Sure.
Hi, Melissa. So it's at Covenant House, Michigan. I'm really interested. So obviously there's a lot of worry around inflation and donations and Thanksgiving and Giving Tuesday and Christmas and end of year and all these sort of things. I'd just love to know from people, if you want to put in the chat, how's your end of year fundraising doing? It's a mixed bag from a lot of people I've heard from. So quite a few of my clients are having a bit of a record end of year. A few others are saying, meh. So how's it doing for you, everybody? Let us know while we're waiting to get going. That'd be quite handy. Danielle, how's it going for you? Joanne, Laurel, Laurie, Megan, Timothy, Sophia, Robert, Whitney, let us know how your fundraising is going at the moment. Worse than I hoped. Isn't that always the case, JC? But worse than normal, maybe. And slow response for your end of year, says Margaret. Let's hope that somebody's got something good, but if not, well, what we're going to do today is going to help in the long term turn that around. I'm new, just left Domestic Violence Center and fundraising was above average there. Okay, Melissa, congratulations on the new job. Relatively new clients seem slow because of the learning curve from each. Oh, that does happen, doesn't it, Vernon, when they're picking up new stuff. But it gets very exciting very quick. So I love getting new clients. It's always nothing wrong with old clients too. They're great too. Anybody else? Anybody had a really big gift at Thanksgiving that they could use for a match fund at Christmas or anything like that? I've seen quite a few people turn things around by doing that. We're doing a Christmas card, asked that is late due, doing a final push for $1 million campaign for Melissa. Wow. Understaffing. Oh, yes. That is a big problem worldwide for many organizations, Melissa. So my heart goes out to you with that one. And look after yourself as well. People are overworking to compensate for that. And charities are not great at looking after their people. So make sure you're being looked after and take care. Anybody else? Any updates on your fundraising? Oh, there's lots of people coming in now.
Yeah. Watching the numbers tick up here. So Sean, why don't we go ahead and get started?
Sure, I'm up for that.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome. I hope you're having a great week. My name is Mary Krogan, and I'm the VP of Product Marketing here at Bloomerang. And I'm really excited to host our Thought Leadership webinar today. And this is an opportunity for us to bring in amazing people like our guest, Sean Triner, to share their experience and expertise and help us create thriving nonprofits. And today, we're talking about donor acquisition and how to assess and improve your results. Before I turn things over to Sean, we're going to cover a couple housekeeping items for you. We are recording today's session. So you'll receive the slides along with the recording and other resources via email after today's session. If you have questions, please use the Q&A tab in the console to submit them, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of Sean's presentation. And feel free to follow along, share any interesting advice or your thoughts on Twitter. For those of you that are not familiar with us, Bloomerang is a donor relationship management platform, and we are focused on making fundraising easier and helping you foster meaningful, authentic relationships with your donors so your organization can thrive. We have great software, helps you acquire, retain, and engage your donor community. So when you have a moment, check out our solutions, request a demo. We'd be happy to share those solutions with you. But for right now, we're focused on our guest presenter, Sean Triner. Sean, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I understand you are a trained comedian, a deadly snake rescuer, and a volunteer firefighter. And we want to hear a little bit more about that. But as I pass the baton over to you here, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your professional background? So I'll stop sharing and you can take over.
Thank you. Yes, honestly, the deadly snake rescuing and the comedy is relevant for my professional career as well. I'm honest, it's been very helpful, especially with dealing with some boards. But anyway, yeah, so I've been in fundraising all of my career since 1988. I know many of you watching will be saying, well, hang on, he must have been 2 years old. And indeed, I wasn't. But I've been working in fundraising for a long time in medical research, disability, and mental health before moving on and working in setting up my own business here in Australia. I emigrated in 2002 and set up a full service direct marketing agency with digital, mail, and a lot of consulting strategy stuff, and particularly around bequests, mid-major donors, that sort of stuff. I am back in the day. I'm one of the pioneers of face-to-face, one of the first charities to run face-to-face street fundraising. You know, when people stop you in the street and run and ask you for a monthly gift back in the 90s. And I ran the first global online two-step campaign with Soy Dog Foundation from Thailand, which has set a precedent for how everybody around the world now does two-step lead generation, where they get new online donors in onto monthly giving. And I did a lot of stuff during COVID, including a session with Bloomerang that went down very well, where we actually had lots of webinars and templates for how to get emergency campaigns out during COVID. And I know that they've been used by, those actual templates have been used by hundreds of charities around the world. Now, very relevant, because towards the end of this, I'm going to share with you a very useful blueprint as well. So please do hang on, and I'm going to give you a really, really good and useful blueprint, which is going to be helpful for you. Now, Sarah is going to put up a little quiz type thing, so I can just get a little bit of information about you all. So if you would be so kind as to complete this. It's popped up on my screen, but I can't vote. So just please quickly just tick those things. We'll just take a minute or so, hopefully get everybody's answers in pretty quickly. That would be great. How are you all doing? Can you, Sarah, can you tell me in the chat how many people have answered, or so that I know how it's going? Hopefully Amber, Angie, the Angies, the Kathys, Joanne's, Kate, Kathy, Hopefully you've all done it so far. Come on, we're at around 20% so far. So let's get a few more people to just click on those links. Don't worry if you don't know the answer exactly, or if you're a supplier, just guess about what's right. And if you're a supplier, just use a favorite client as your example. So that would be good. Can you keep me a running count there, please, Sarah? And then let me know the answers. Okay, that's nearly everybody. Okay, so we're gonna move on then. So just finish off if you can, if you haven't quite finished, but we're up around 65, 70%. So that's great. Thank you very much. Now Sarah's going to give me the answers, I hope. And while that's coming in, I am going to, do I need to close that poll to stop it? Oh yeah. Oh, lovely. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so direct mail is big. It's big. So we're getting a big proportion of people using direct mail, about the same using online. So 63% and 54%. A few people doing mass face-to-face, like stopping people on the door-to-door, 17%. Still quite a few people with TV and radio. Nearly everybody, or no, 2/3 on fundraising events. And most are using return on investment as the measure, which is because it's probably one of the best ones. We're still looking at percentage, response rate, cost per donor, and about half are either not sure or we don't. 33% have had a bequest program for a long time, and 17% yes, but less than 3 years. That's about half of you are running bequest programs. 29% planning on it. Planning on it is great, just doesn't work. You have to do it. Okay, I'm being facetious there. And 4% said, what's that? And the donor spread, only a couple over 10,000. So there's a real spread in size. So I will tailor accordingly. We literally have every tiny charities to massive charities here. So thank you very much and welcome. Right, why do I care about this? Because I really hope then you're going to discover some stuff that's actually going to have a profound impact on your donor acquisition decisions. It has, for every charity that I've sat and worked through this with them, it has changed things dramatically. So I'm hoping it's going to have a big impact for you as well. And it's all about shifting the way that we look at long-term donors. And how much they really are, how much value really is in our donors. And for half of the people today, you're not realizing at least 2/3 or even 3/4 of the value of your donors because you told me that you don't currently have a bequest program. So there we go. So why are we measuring acquisition results incorrectly? I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to show you some things to do, which is very much around gifts in wills. Probably no surprise there. Now, I do have a load of other workshops, which are everything that Mosianic does. Actually, I don't know about within Bloomerang, but everything we do is CFRE CE points. But there are some other handy workshops around donor acquisition, depending on where you're at with your fundraising acquisition right now. So you can check these out. Just have a look at mosianic.com/join. We're actually closed, so just join the waiting list for now. But that would be great to come and have a look. And there's a full course about bequests. You're going to see why that is so relevant for all fundraisers, even if your job is not planned giving or bequests. Right. So when we're doing our acquisition, when we're going out and we're getting new donors, then there's a few things that we do that you might not have this written down, but this is the plan that nearly everybody uses when we are doing acquisition. So you basically plan, what am I going to do? How am I going to get donors? Where's my audience? Who's most likely to respond? Then you test something, right? So how well did that do? You evaluate it, then you maybe roll out if it's working. So literally, we go through this process every time. We plan, we test, hopefully an A/B test, in other words, 2 packs or 2 different lists or something like that. But if the volume's too small, well, we just give it a go and see what happens. We evaluate those results. And then if we're straight away, we're trying to get people to give a one-off gift, then we would look at ROI. And that was the #1 measure that people were saying. So return on investment, and that, of course, is your costs divided, your income divided by your costs. And if our return on investment is above 60%, then we are very, very happy. That's really good for pretty much any type of acquisition. If it's below 60%, we might be thinking about whether we should continue or not, but we might still continue because we might have just done a test and we've got some things that we can do better. And then we also go, hey, so that's how much I got back straight away, but what about into the future? Will these people give a second gift? Will they become a monthly giver? Things like that. If we get monthly givers, then we're going to model. So if I got 50 people giving me $20 a month, then I'm going to go, okay, well, that's $1,000 a month. Multiply that by 12 and I would get 12,000, but I'll lose a few of them. So I might say I'm going to get 9,000. So was it worth the cost to get that? So we're going to kind of look at a couple of things to measure there. Sometimes, however, early results aren't good. So we go, okay, that was really not very good. We did a direct mail. We went to 10,000 people and we got 5 responses and they gave us $50. So we're not going to do that again. So we go back to planning and then we go through the process. Whereas if the results are good, we do more of whatever it was, right? So I'm hoping that most of you know this because this is what you do. Again, you might not have a little diagram like this. Then, of course, into the next year, we're going to look at, did those donors stay with us? Did they upgrade? Did they give second gifts, monthly giving, all that kind of stuff? So we actually start looking at whether our models were right. And if they did, we carry on rolling out. Either way, we're going to go back to square one, even if we're still rolling out, because don't be complacent. Just because your direct mail or your digital or your face-to-face or your TV is working, if it's working, it's not going to work forever, and things are going to go up and down. So let's try some other acquisition too. So that's what we do. The real problem comes in how we do those measures. And the measures that I gave you are probably the best early measures that you can do around your acquisition. But none of them can take into account time. Now, talking of time, a long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, well, in England, when computers looked like that and sounded like, I fired up the spreadsheet program and I wanted to prove or find out if the real money was in bequests. So I thought, well, I think bequests are much, much more valuable. Gifts in wills, legacies, whatever you want to call them. I thought they were much more valuable. There wasn't enough data and evidence. So I went off and I've been working with this client, a cancer research institution in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. I've been working with them for a very, very long time. And so we have a lot of data because they are really, really good at recording data. And there's things like, which a lot of charities don't record, like date of birth, which is so, so important. I'd actually rather have date of birth than a signature on a check or an expiry date on a credit card. Date of birth is actually more valuable than that initial donation. I really, really, really want that date of birth. And you'll see why as we go through. And they have a really world-class bequest program. So they are really, really on top. They're using events, they're using webinars, they're using phone, mass phone. They do a brilliant supporter connection survey, which is the best thing you can possibly do. And you don't have a bequest program unless you're doing a supporter connection survey. And they have a really good direct marketing. So basically, great mob. And I would say that I've been working with them for 20 years, but they really are good. And they let me share some data. And they found out that actually, by the way, I'll put a kit in there because I'm a mathematician. So I'm hoping you're going to come along with me for the data ride. But I think that we're throwing millions away because of the way that we assess our donor acquisition results, which I really do think that that is a real problem and a big issue. So flashback, December 2009. Everyone remembers then, before COVID, remember life before COVID? They did this direct mail pack. It's a pretty classic pack, fantastic copy, does have a premium in it. The labels, and it had a bounce back as well. That dove was a card that you returned with a message to people with cancer. So they sent that out. It cost them nearly $200,000. They got about 130,000 back. That gave them a return on investment of 0.69. And as I said before, 0.6 or above is going to be good. So they're very happy with that. They got nearly 3,000 new donors. So they were a very happy result. In 2009, that was pretty good. Nowadays, that would be excellent. They were pretty happy with that result. So very happy on a decent sized volume. So they then, what we did, I exercised just a few months ago, is we sat down and we analyzed how much money have those 2,908 people done since we got them on board 12 years ago. And how much, so how much money have they donated, how, monthly giving, additional stuff, and how much have we actually spent on communicating with them over the last 12 years? And here's the answers. So as you know, they got 129 in straight away. They spent 356,000 across the last 12 years communicating with them. They're a really good charity because they actually log the costs against each donor, which is phenomenally useful for all charities. But I do appreciate it's a bit of a pain, but you can do it, and it is so worthwhile, because when your board or your CEOs try telling you to cut this, cut that, or whatever, particularly right now, which has happened across the board, people are having to cut budgets, you can show them exactly the return if you're actually measuring costs against the actual donors like they do. It's a fantastic thing that they're doing. Anyway, over those 12 years, they've had $1.286 million come in from those donors at a cost of about $356,000. Not a bad return. If you were putting that into your private pension plan or super or whatever you call it, depending on what country you're in, if you put all that money in there and you get that return, that's a pretty good return for over that time. So that's including all of their gifts, right? So their appeal gifts, their donations from monthly giving, and some of them are mid and major donors. So I'm going to just put that in a different format. Hopefully you're still with me at the moment. So in a different format, basically that immediate money they spent, that first one is showing you they spent that bit of money, the red, and they got that bit of money in. And then over 12 years, they'd spent quite a bit more, but look at the good return that they'd had. So they're pretty happy with that return, about 10 to 1, or sorry, just over 5 to 1 over 12 years. So pretty impressed with that. But then a lot of these donors have sadly passed away. These beautiful people have donated a lot along that journey, but some of them have died. And those that have died, out of those, a handful, I think about 35 or something like that, have written Peter Mac, this charity, into their will. And look how much value is in those bequests. Just look at that. So those of you who aren't doing bequest programs, that is literally the money that you're not getting from your donors. It is a huge amount. And actually, it's bigger than that, because on top of that, they have also got a number of donors, again, around 30. A conservative estimate of the value of those donors' bequests is that orange blob on the top there. So you can see that actually the donation revenue is a fraction of the long-term revenue from this. Now, it's hard enough to get your bosses to think 3 or 5 years ahead, but trying to get them to think 12 years ahead, it's actually worth it for the future of your cause, for the future of the things that you're trying to make better. Now, that wasn't just a one-off, by the way. This was just one campaign, Christmas 2009 direct mail acquisition campaign, and that's what happened from that campaign. So what I've done on the next chart is I've got all of the different campaigns that they've done right up until 2022. And those blue blobs are the total income from donations that they've got from those donors that were acquired on that pack. So in 2014, May, they did a direct mail pack, and they've got just over $1.2 million in from those people over the last 8 years. And then the pink blob is the bequests that have been realized from those people as well. And you can see that really the big money, you can see there's a couple of little bequests here, but the real big money is starting about 10 years ago. So they're really beginning to realize their income. Now, when I actually do this on multiple charities, it does start a bit earlier on average, but it's still, coming in at around 7 years. But this, it's not, a lot of people might think of bequest programs as icing on the cake. It's not that, it's the other way around, especially because remember, this charity is really good at their legacies. check that out. That's the value of the confirmed bequests that they've got as well. Now, this charity is so good with their data. They're so good with their bequest program. They're so good at their record keeping that those brown blobs on top are the minimum that they really will get as a consequence of bequests. They're probably underestimating by 2/3 or something. So it's a huge, huge, huge difference there. So I've just, because there's a few people who measure their donor success by income per 1,000 donors or income per donor. That was, I think, about 1/5 of people here. So you can see that that's just looking at per donor, just over that 10 years plus. And you can see, even if we're just looking per donor, then you can see that the bequests are where the real money is. And the longer it has been, the more, the longer it has been, then the more money you're going to have, because of course people are aging. So this is where I really I'm hoping that you use the Q&A button and start asking some questions in here, because I've showed you lots of really, really big charts and big stuff. I want you to ask me questions about this, and I want you in the chat to sort of say, what do you think about this? What impact might this have? And for people like Vernon and others who are suppliers, what difference is this going to make to your work with your clients? Or you knew it all anyway. A lot of people knew it in their hearts, but they didn't have the data to back it up. The problem, of course, is channel. So whilst direct mail was the largest channel in the poll that we did of attendees, live attendees today, it was only just above digital, and face-to-face was up there as well. And this is going to have a big impact because of age of donors. Our beautiful direct mail responders, those lovely people who get a letter in the post and send you a check, although in many countries it won't be a check because checks are disappearing from the earth. They are going to disappear from the United States as well, eventually, but they are disappearing. And so make sure your charity is getting ready to be checklist ready. But what we can see is people who are direct mail donors. In the US, the average age is about 72. It's about the same here. In some countries, in like Republic of Ireland and many Southeast Asian countries, it's a bit younger than 70, but overall 70 is a good age. So what I've done here is I've looked at Australia life expectancy, which is about 3 to 5 years more than US expectancy, comparable to Canadian, and about the same as Western European. So depending on what country you're in, it's going to be within a couple of years. Don't worry too much that this is Australian data. But this is showing you the proportion of basically when people will pass away on average. And what we can see, so in that example that I showed you before, that really big example from 2009, 2009 was about 12 years ago. So those bequests that have come in are the people who died within 5 years, which wasn't that many, the people who died 5 to 10, and half of the people who are going to die in 10 to 15 years after that, give or take. So you can still see there's a lot of bequest potential still lying there. So the charity is not being complacent. It's still talking to those people about making sure that they put the charity in their will. But you can see the bulk of the money is going to come 10 to 25 years. Now, a quick poll in the chat, tell me if you are working on your 2052 budget for 30 years time. Of course you're not. But we still do need to be looking at that kind of time frame, because if we're going to invest in different types of activities, if we're pulling out of direct mail, for example, we're really missing out on a lot of bequests, unless we don't do a bequest program, in which case we really need to be doing that. Now, if I'm acquiring donors digitally, or when of donors that we retain, so people who make multiple gifts, when we acquired them, the average age was about 50. And again, that varies a little bit depending on the type of charity. So Amnesty International, WWF, Greenpeace might be more like 46. Heart Foundation, Cancer Council, those sort of organizations might be like 52. But they're going to be around 50. And again, we might see a few people realize bequests because, of course, that's the average age. So just because the average age is 50, not everybody is 50 at the time of acquisition. You will be picking up some 60-year-olds for your digital, 60 plus, and 70-year-olds. This is really important because actually I want to know from my digital how old people are, because I know the average age is 50, and I know I'm really busy and I've got cash flow to worry about. So I might be prioritizing who I'm going to talk to about bequests. So I really, really want to know date of birth at digital. So any way that you can, at the point of acquisition, any way you can incentivize getting date of birth, like send free calendars based on their birth date, a digital calendar, things like that. What is it that we could do? So it's, print at home calendar with beautiful photography from your organization, stuff like that. There's things that we can do to incentivize their getting their date of birth. So you can see that's going to take a lot longer. Now, a few of you do face-to-face, so that's the kids on the street stopping you saying, hello, can I talk to you about monthly giving? That's a fantastic, the biggest source of monthly givers in the United States now. It was just before COVID. Obviously, it wasn't during COVID, and I really don't know if it's gone back to being the biggest one post-COVID yet. But it's a huge source of monthly givers around the world. And what we can see here is it's a bit longer before you actually start realizing those bequests, a lot longer. And again, the average age is about 45. So why is this relevant? Because a lot of us are moving away from direct mail into digital and face-to-face, and have been doing over the last 10 to 15 years. And effectively, we are missing out on bequests. Even if our direct mail program was pretty marginal at best, as long as we had a good bequest program, we're actually going to still make quite a bit of money in the future. So we really, really, really want to have a balanced portfolio. We want to be still bringing in our direct mail donors. This isn't an advert for, postage stamps. I'm put up by US Post here, but it is true that keeping direct mail working now is really important for us as we bring in younger people as well through other sources, and as older people move to digital and face-to-face as their channels of choice. So there is a transition still. And yes, direct mail is in decline in many countries, in many places, but some charities are doing really well out of it. But if we consider the implications around bequests, it's huge. I got a little bit more data for you as well. Just some other stuff. So this is a study of lots of charities. So $1 billion worth of donations. So tons and tons of data here. And what this is showing us is that when you look at people who have told you that they have put you in their will, they are much more likely to have donated recently. So you can see this group here. So the recency of the donors is that you got them within 12 months of a gift. So that's really, really important, because if you think about people who give the first time in response to any acquisition, like I showed you, 49% of those ever gave again to Peter Mack's 2009 campaign. And it'll be about the same for you. Between 30 and 50% of them will ever donate again. But actually, we want to reach people, because a lot of people, they gave within 12 months of putting them in the will. And you can see it's a huge proportion. We can also see, this is a bit of a myth buster. So a lot of people think that, bequesters are, oh yeah, you're going to get your bequests from the person who gives you $5 every Christmas. And yes, she's a bequest potential. Yes, she probably is. But she's down in this group. She's actually not that likely to put you in her will. The reason that you hear about it all the time is because it's a story. It's unusual. So you don't hear many stories about retired accountant and banker leave $1 million to a charity. Well, there's a boring story. Whereas when you have a person who lived with all the cats on the end of the road, and everybody knew her, she was really nice, but she didn't have any money, and it turns out she did, that's a story. So it's basically availability bias that makes us think that lower value people are more likely to put, or lower value donation people, there's no lower value people, but those people who gave lower gifts, it's actually higher gifts are much more likely to put us in their will. But there's a heck of a lot more of these people than there are of these people. So it doesn't mean that we should be ignoring our lower value donors. Definitely not, because there are a heck of a lot more of these than there are here. So, but this really helps you because you have a finite budget, right? Put your hand up if you've got an infinite budget. So that means that you're going to have to make some choices and triaging around who you actually go for in your bequests. And you're going to go for people who gave recently and people who've given a lot, and of course, people who are older. Now, nearly every charity that I've ever worked with does not bother targeting people who've only made one gift. it really does make sense to not bother targeting when you think of it. But when you actually drill down in the data, what this is showing you, each one of these boxes is the number of gifts that someone had made when they put a charity in their will. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that, and then this one is 15 or more. So it is true that at the time that they told you that they put you in their will, the majority of people that do that have given 15 or more times. Well, there's a few reasons for that. One is that about half of the charity of the people here in this live webinar said that they haven't got a bequest program. If you introduce a bequest program right now, the majority of your bequests are going to come from people that have given many, many times because you've never asked them before. So that's where you're going to identify your bequests. And everybody's got to start at some point with a bequest program. And when they do that, they're going to have lots of donors that have been giving for a long time and they've never asked before. So that's going to be one of the reasons. And the other reason is there's quite a lot of them anyway, and they are your most loyal donors, of course. But what's really, really interesting is these people had only ever given once, and no charities are really even targeting that group. So they're not spending any money on trying to get this group into bequests. So there's a lot of worries here because half of these are never going to give again. So actually, half of these people, we wouldn't even bother asking them for bequests because they're going to have lapsed in 2 years' time. We might not even have them on our direct mail list anymore. But in actual fact, we really want to have a cheap, cost-effective way of getting to these people to talk about bequests right at the beginning when we first do this donor acquisition, whatever the acquisition was. So we really need to start these bequest conversations very, very quickly, but we've still got to, you haven't got infinite budget. So we've still got to do these cheaply, cost effectively. And when we're doing more expensive things like events or personal visits or even phone calls, then we'll be wanting to go for our best or most likely targets. So what we want to try and do is find date of birth of these people as much as we can. We don't need to worry so much about date of birth with direct mail. If we've got them from direct mail, they are the right age for bequests. Don't worry about those. We definitely want to be talking to everybody acquired by direct mail about bequests. But if they were acquired by digital or face-to-face, we want to really work hard at getting their date of birth. It's still useful to get date of birth of direct mail donors as well, so you can send them their beautiful calendar and their birthday card and things like that. All right, that's it for the numbers, mostly. So finding these gorgeous people who choose to give up their hard-earned cash to support your cause because of basically love. That's all there is about it. They have this love. And you know that most acquisition takes a couple of years to recover costs. And bequests aren't going to help because you're not going to get a lot of money in with your bequests. So if you are really cash poor, and you're worried about finances, your P&L is not looking good, then bequests are not the right thing for you right now. Annoyingly, if you'd have invested them in 10 years ago, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in now, but that's easy to say. It's true, but don't worry. It doesn't mean that you have to rush out if you're in financial troubles. Then bequest isn't the right thing because you're still going to have a cash flow problem. But you can do some cheap stuff on bequests. But right now, if you're in a bit of bother, we're worried about inflation, finances, just the financial market's not looking great, then you really want to be getting your cash in first. And the best way there is mid-value donors, and in particular, risking your own donors on a large scale to provide match funds. That's how we've turned tons of charities around in difficult times. Anyway, bequest isn't going to help with your short-term cash flow because let's say you abandoned direct mail 4 years ago because the results weren't good enough. If you go back in, there's still going to be those results, but you're really planning on those bequests, which are going to be in 7, 10, 12 years time. So you've got to be able to make sure you have the cash flow for this. This is heavy stuff, isn't it? I am always happy, by the way, to meet up with boards and bosses to help you. So just email me and I'm happy to come and help. But anyway, bequest income is the long-term value game changer. It is where the money is. If you look at the biggest fundraisers in your city, state, or country, it's very likely that they're doing really well from their bequests, which is effectively underpinning all of their other direct marketing activities. And indeed, your bequest income. So a good way of looking at it when you're presenting to this board is if your total donation income is 400,000, then there is definitely much, much more than $400,000 worth of bequests in your database. So there's at least 100% more money in your database through a really good bequest program. If your income from your donations is 3 million a year, there is definitely at least another 3 million in bequest. And of course, we can still grow that income. We can do better direct marketing and all those other things from your current file. And the average, what we find with most Yannick clients is just by putting best practice into current programs, we can get up towards the double of income there. So it might actually be even more value in your bequest program. So there is a ton of money there if you can think long term. And that is really hard because I imagine most people watching this are fundraisers, and you've got to go and convince the CFO, the CEO, and possibly even the board to invest like this. And if you do, it will be your legacy for your organization. You will have a profound impact on that organization's future if you do that. So please do. Great. So how are you throwing the money away? Well, because you're making decisions on normal donations. Nearly everybody, Peter Mack obviously is an example of someone who doesn't. Everyone just does that. Some people put an estimate of bequests in there, which is really good if you're doing that. And there is a lot more money, but you need this good gift and will bequest legacy program. And it's more important, I think, to get this right than other planned giving mechanisms. I know bequests are not the most efficient, they're not the most tax effective way of getting big gifts because it's post-tax, but even so, it's one of the easiest programs to just get up and running whilst you're running all of your PAFs, DAFs, IRA campaigns, or all those different things that you might be doing. Really got to keep your bequests on fire as well. Now, there has been a big shift away from direct mail. So I'm not saying definitely do direct mail, but I'm saying revisit direct mail. And even if you have a bequest program, I'm betting that you don't invest enough in your gift and will program because I haven't actually found any single charity that does. And there's actually a formula. I can look at your database and actually work out what is the optimum amount of money to spend on your bequest program, which is a combination of donor webinars, staff, mailings, fundraising, bequest events, and most importantly of all, the most important thing when it comes to bequests is the telephone. So all of those things cost money and very few people invest enough in it. Anyway, please do, we're coming towards the end of my slide, so please do ask some questions in the Q&A when we get there. So what can you do about it? Well, the obvious thing is when you're looking at your acquisition, do take into account bequest if you're good at bequest program. It's no good saying, oh, look, Sean says I can double my money. Not if you don't talk to people about bequests, you can't. You're going to have to do a good bequest program. And any bequest program is a good bequest program, but a very good bequest program is still going to be a lot better. Obviously, male acquired donors are older, so that's going to be a big difference. So those of you doing mailing, it's really important for you. For others, it's still important as well. And I've got some ideas of some things that you could do around digital as well. So, but do remember that cash flow issue as well. Now, okay, so here's some tips. You do need, and okay, it is a bit of an ad, but it is because this is really what you should do is make sure that you check out our acquisition workshops and bequest course and do the supporter survey. I'm not going to dwell on that because I'm just saying that these are really useful tools for you. And you really need to send that supporter connection survey every year without fail, every single year. That survey is the way in Australia, New Zealand, and lots of my American, Canadian, and European clients, it finds something like 80 or 90% of all bequests. So of all of the different methods that people use to find people who have to just get them to tell you that they put you in their will, the survey is like the strongest device. It's just brilliant. And it will work so well with online will making as well. So you've got to send that survey every year, and you also should make sure that survey goes as part of the welcome process of all donors. Even if they're one-off and they send you $10, we want to get the survey to them. We really want to get that survey. It's so important for any bequest or gifting will or planned giving program. Evaluate add your bequests to your models, even if you're making some conservative guesstimates. Make some conservative guesstimates, but just put in and say, yeah, but what if? Because here in Australia, it's about 35,000, it's about 30,000, depending on who you talk to in the US. It's about 25,000 euros in Europe. So depending on where you are, that's the average bequest. And there are little tips, really important tips. So in all your bequest or gifting will materials, if you tell people the different ways that you can put your charity in the will, you are losing massive amounts of money. Just tell them one way. There's one way that's so important that makes a huge difference between an average of 3,500 per bequest to 35,000 per bequest. So you can tenfold increase the value of bequest just by how you phrase the ask. It's a huge, huge, huge thing that makes such a big difference. So there's little things like that that we must get right. And then we can model that long-term value. So you have limited resources though, so do make sure you put that survey in to everybody, digital for email, email to digital donors, email to face-to-face donors, and mail to mail donors. In that welcome journey, it is well worth the cost, not just for bequest, it pays for itself with mid-value and match funds and everything else. We do want to start with older people. We do want people who've donated above average. And I used to say you don't need to rush into it, but actually given the number of people who do put a charity in their will after one gift, I think it is worthwhile doing it even after that first gift as part of that journey. And do, particularly for those younger people, promote online will making. I just Googled and found 3 straight off, one in the UK, one in Australia, one in the US. Online will making, they're your new buddy. They are, make sure you drive a hard bargain, because some of them, they only make their money from the charity. You pay a subscription and they give free wills, that kind of stuff. It's a huge, huge money maker for you. Again, it's going to take a while, but at last we're getting high numbers of younger people to put charities in their will as a consequence of the free will and their other will making, online will making stuff. So they're going to be your real new buddies, because especially with my digital program, I want to integrate these in there, whether you're white labeling or just having a presence on these websites or just sending your donors to them, doesn't really, it does matter, but you want to be doing that pretty quickly. So I would be contacting some of those. If any of those are watching, then yeah, chat away in everyone in the chat. You might as well tell people that you're here. Okay, if you're making calls to donors for any reason, right? So let's say I'm ringing up to say thank you for your donation. So we thank our donors on the phone, or I'm ringing them because we've got them from any other reason. I'm upgrading them. I'm asking them to upgrade their monthly gift. Anything that I'm doing, then try and get whoever's making the call, whether it's an agency or yourselves, to log that person sounded really old, or they said something like, I'm retired, I'm a pensioner, I'm too old, those sort of things. We want to flag that. Make sure, depending on what jurisdiction that you're in, you're allowed to do that. But if you are, we want to log that. So we want them to tell us that that's what they said. And I really love the idea of adding a question to all phone calls, something like, we're doing an ongoing survey on how people support charity. Have you ever included a gift in your charity? Or even have you ever considered including a gift in your will to a charity? So that kind of phrasing at the end of any phone sales pitch for anything, it could be events, it could be upgrading, it could be for a match donation, just have that phrase in there to help generate leads. Now, if you do lead acquisition, so 2 steps. So this was pioneered by Soy Dog Foundation. It is now around the world. This is where you do something like a petition or, sign this thing, or even a quiz or a poll or something like that. People respond, and then you ring them up and you email them and you say, would you become a monthly giver? It's one of the biggest growing sources of monthly givers in the world. It hasn't taken off in the United States to the same degree as in many other countries, in Canada as well, not so good there. But Western Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it is huge. And it is actually huge for some charities in the US, particularly advocacy organizations like Greenpeace and Amnesty International. But if you're doing that, you might get 1,000 leads, or you get through to 1,000 people who've signed your petition. I'm guessing statistically there might be 100 people over 65, but you don't know who they are. Of those, it's good news if out of 1,000 you get 50 to become monthly givers from a phone call. That's really good. You'd be pretty happy with that. But it does mean, let's say 10 gave you a gift, you've got 940 people, and what are you going to do? You just email them and that's it, right? I'm saying let's improve our data capture, get those date of births. I think that there is more money in those 1,000 leads in the long term from bequests than there is for their lifetime monthly gifts. So when I model that, it looks like that should be the case. There's a lot more money in bequest. And because we're not just looking at those 50, we're looking at all 940. All of them have actually said they're interested in your organization. They're interested in the cause. And they might not ever give you a cash donation or whatever, but they may well become a bequester. So I really, really want to start going in there. Now, to my knowledge, no one has done this yet. So I have got that on. That's a new audience. Evaluate carefully. And remember, it's going to be a long time before you realize that income. But try and find out about those people, all those leads. If you have leads, don't ignore bequest marketing to that group. We really need to work on that. All right, finally, if you do one thing as a consequence of today, then please, 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 please send your support connection survey in the welcome process and send it to people every year. There is nothing better to drive mid-value donations, match funding. So you're getting the matches with these surveys. They help you get matches. It gives you great personalization for when you're having conversations with major donors and bequesters. There's no better tool for a fundraiser than the survey. I have done a Bloomerang webinar on a survey, although it's evolved a bit since then, but make sure you're doing a survey. Anyway, I did promise you a free kit. We're doing good for time, I believe. So have we got any questions? Mary,
we do. Yes, Sean, thank you. This has been really interesting. I've enjoyed being a silent observer here. Couple questions. The first one is from Renee. She's asking, what is the best way to ask for bequests? How many touches does it take on average, and does it require in-person visits?
It doesn't, firstly, I'll revert backwards. It doesn't require personal visits. Personal visits are actually very, very expensive, much more expensive than people think. The average cost of a personal visit in the same town is something like $250, which is quite expensive, but it's still worth it with bequests. I would reserve personal visits for people who meet all the criteria. You know, they are older, they've given multiple gifts, and they've said something positive in response to a survey around bequests, just because they're very time intensive. But how many touch points? It's actually, I reckon that from the first conversation, we've had a look at data. It tends to be quite anecdotal now, though. We can't get like big proper data on this, but certainly when I look at the anecdotal data, we're looking at around 2 years from the moment we have a first bequest conversation to them actually confirming. And we can see that sort of the people that have been confirmed over the last 10 or 12 years, 60 or 70% of them had confirmed within 2 years of that first conversation, right? So in the long term, that will hopefully get a bit better, but we're looking at about 2 years. And that might mean there would certainly be 2 surveys in there. There'd probably be 2 follow-ups from that. Hopefully there's to be customer care, some thanking, so a donor care letter, an annual donor care letter to those sort of people. So we're probably talking around 6 or 7 touch points. And what's really important is that we don't take lapsed donors out of our mail program who have ever made any indication that they might be interested. Professor Russell James in the US, in Texas, he has a lot of work around that kind of stuff, and worries that when people might be donating to you, then and they put you in the will, and they go into assisted living, and then they, for whatever reason, they don't make the gifts anymore. It might be hard for them. The person never puts it in the post or whatever, and then they suddenly don't get any communications from you because you're treating them as lapsed. So we keep those conversations going on. So a long time. So it is probably at least 6 communications is what you'd be aiming for over the next 2 years.
Great. Okay, so this is somewhat related. It was something that popped into my head too. You know, how can you talk about bequests with a donor sensitively? Death can be such a difficult subject.
It's true, and you do it by just the reluctance is usually within ourselves and not within the donors. I remember I was doing a conference in the Philippines, and somebody put up their hand and said, we couldn't do bequest fundraising in the Philippines because death is really, really sensitive here. It's not like it is in Australia. By the way, death is very sensitive in Australia too. So that's what they said. And there's a lot of religious organizations. About 90% of all charitable stuff is either Muslim or Christian charities in the Philippines, or it feels like it when you're there. And there were some nuns there, and one of the nuns stood up and said, you just talk to them about it. You don't talk about death. You talk about their legacy, you talk about their family, you talk about the charity, the cause, you talk about, you say, we have this generational work. Do you really think this is really important into the future? This is one of the questions that we put into their survey, by the way. It's one of the smartest questions. It's around, do you really care about this thing that's going to go into the future? Well, the only chance I've got of making this continue in the future is if I can get people to put charities in their will. You're not talking about death directly. And quite often people will say to you, oh, you're just waiting for me to cark it. Well, they might not say cark it in America, but I think you get the idea. Kick the bucket, buy the farm. So often they might come back to you with something like that, but generally people are pretty cool with that. You talk about the legacy. You talk about what's actually going to happen, what's needed from the cause. And then we actually teach one-on-one how to make those asks, because it's a lot about the confidence in the person making the ask.
No, that's great insight. Another question, kind of shifting gears a little bit. I found that purchasing lists is a bust, and this is from Melissa. What is a cost-effective, impactful way to attract new donors?
Oh, well, Melissa, I'd actually have to see what I need to talk to you about. What list did you buy, and see the copy and creative and design that you sent? Because purchasing lists, there's so much, it's like an airplane. The list is the port wing, and all the copy creative and design is the starboard wing, and both have to be in perfect flying condition, or otherwise you're going down. I hope that makes sense. So some charities are finding that direct mail is still good from buying lists. Others do a lot of swaps and co-op lists and things like that. Even door drops, which is unaddressed mail in a certain area, which is best practice, or not best practice, but a good idea only for very local charities. So Melissa, basically mail needs to just go into your portfolio of decisions to make. But just because it didn't work in the past doesn't mean it won't work into the future. So other cost-effective ways there, firstly, is to understand that all donor acquisition at scale is going to take a lot of money upfront. Basically, there's no donor acquisition at scale that makes money straight away, except in an emergency, like if you were doing a big bushfire or something. So this is what we call tactical acquisition. Strategic acquisition is at scale, whereas tactical acquisition, there's each one of these is about an hour long, giving you those answers. So there's quite a lot of answers into that question about what. But tactical acquisition is just where you do what you normally do with your current donors, but you include a few new donors as well. So it might be you're communicating with your donors online, so you do some extra Facebook ads, things like that. So there's things like that you can do at tactical level, but at strategic level, your only choices really in the US are media, so that's TV, radio, and I'll just stick with the broadcast media, TV, radio, and the remaining local newspapers that are around. Then you've got direct mail, and what you want to do is work with a specialist partner on that, somebody who really knows, an agency or a supplier that is going to buy the lists for you, do the copy and creative for you. You can do face-to-face, which is where you hire agencies to stop people in the street and do monthly giving. That's one of the most cost-effective methods for many charities. You can do online lead gen, which is where, particularly if you're an advocacy organization, you basically say, hey, this is really wrong. Should we do something about this? People say yes. And you say, right, give us some money, but in a beautiful way. What am I missing? Digital, There are other things like prize draws, which don't really get you donors, but they get you some money potentially. So there's only a limited number of media that you can actually do it. One of my favorites for local charities is multimedia community programs, where you basically get press, PR in your local newspapers, online, on the local radio and stuff like that. And you combine that with door drops and a couple of fundraising, very specific type of fundraising events. Hope that's useful, Melissa, but I'd have to catch up with you to give you more details.
We have one last question, and I apologize for the barking dog in the background. My neighbor just got home from work. What type of questions do you recommend on the new donor survey and the current donor survey? And that's from Mark.
So more or less the same questions. There's about a dozen questions that I like to go with. One is like a warm-up question, which is, a really nice and easy question. then just gets people warmed up. Why do you care about cancer or something? Then the next question, I would get straight in there saying, talking about one of the projects that you've got coming up, saying this is a really important program. Why do you want it to be a success? And trying to get them to choose things that are really personal. So the big shift away is, instead of saying to people, which area of our work do you care about? And it could be violence against women, or access to clean water, or food security, for example, for an overseas aid charity. Instead of asking them which one they care about, I'd say, why do you care about violence against women in Papua New Guinea? And then you might have another question, why do you care about access to clean water in Solomon Islands? And so you're basically trying to find people's personal connection with those things. And then, so obvious ones with say cancer or heart and things like that. So I'm trying to find personal connections. So my first question is, why do you care? Or why do you want this to be changed or successful? And then the next question is, my best chance of making it successful is. So that's the kind of approach that we find works best in surveys. And then we'd ask questions just like, are your details correct? Please give us your date of birth, and I'm going to send you a beautiful calendar based on the month of your birth, that kind of stuff. Hopefully, it's a 90-minute webinar, or sorry, 60-minute webinar just on the survey, and a 13.5-hour course. So it's a big one, but I would love to help if I can.
Our last question, any suggestions on how to segment your donor database if you have no age-related data?
Yeah, so it's like what I was saying. If you got them from direct mail, they're older, bluntly. If you got them from digital, on average, they're a bit younger. And that's the kind of approach that you can do. So you can make some assumptions for targeting for gifts and wills in particular. But that would be the way that I'd approach that. And ask for them and do the survey to get date of birth. You'll get up to past 50% date of birth quite quickly.
Well, we are at time. Sean, it was really nice meeting you. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it. Lots of great advice and guidance that you shared with our audience. And for all of you that attended, thank you for joining us and participating. We also appreciate your time and love to see the engagement. To close out, save the date. Our next webinar is on December 8th. Miko Whitlock is scheduled to join us, and we'll be talking about mindfulness for nonprofit professionals, apps, tools, and strategies for conquering year-end stress and starting the new year strong. So I hope you can join us for that. Thanks so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.